Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Dear guests, dear students, dear partners, dear friends, a very warm welcome to Learning from Leaders here at the Bayerische Hof Hotel in Munich. My name is Steffen Lotz. I'm the campus director of the campus Munich here at the EUBS. It's fantastic to see such a diverse audience gathered in one room. And that's exactly what we're here for today. Bringing together experience, ambitions, and fresh perspectives. At the EU Business School, we strongly believe that leadership is not only learned from slides. It's learned from people who have taken real decisions, taken real risks, and taken real complexity. And today we have exactly those people with us. We are honored to welcome three outstanding leaders. Virginie Darbo, Head of Strategy and M&A at Holcim. Maximilian Roedel, co-founder and CPO and CEO of Vantis. And Nikolaus, global leader at the BCG, Henderson Institute, and senior partner and managing director of the BCG. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome. What unites our speakers is simple. They operate where strategy meets complexity. We are equally delighted today. Today's discussion will be hosted by Peter Wenham, who will guide us through the conversation with sharp questions and with some insights. After the panel, I warmly invite you for the cocktail reception, because leadership conversations don't end on stage, they continue in dialogue. Thank you for all being here or joining online. Thank you to our outstanding speakers and sharing your perspective. And thank you, Peter, for being here. Peter, the stage is yours.
Thanks so much. And very special indeed for us to be here. I've already invited our first guest onto the stage, Maximilian, or as I like to call him, Max, if that's okay.
That's
Max.
perfect.
It's very special to be here, for us to be here, and I hope for all of you to be here. I mean, I think you all know that this is a very, very special room. Just a few weeks ago, there were some very different people here in this room. I think we are just as important. You are just as important. We are just as important. But it's, of course, also the venue of the Munich Security Council. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about geopolitics with our third guest, with Nikolaus, because he actually leads the Henderson Institute at BCG, which is all about geopolitics. But first, I want to do something, and I want to take us back in time. I don't know where you guys were, all of you were 6 years ago, probably all around the world in different places. But exactly 6 years ago, two things happened. The first thing that happened was that EU Business School started learning from leaders. At the time, not here at the Bayerische Hof, but forcibly online, because of course it was the outbreak of COVID. And the other thing that happened, Max, I want to ask you, because you at the time were managing global logistics for Amazon. So 6 years ago to the day, can you recall where you were and what you were supposed to be doing?
Yeah, I can share that perspective. If I go back 6 years, and I probably start in January, because I think looking back, it was hilarious how this evolved over time. So in January, COVID broke out in China, or in December, and then there was a rare case in Munich. There were, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4 COVID cases in a business delegation from Webasto who was returning from China, and who had COVID. And with a miracle, 4 days afterwards, it was gone. Because Germany has a superior health system, and everyone was, hey, okay, that can happen in China. Then probably in February or so, it hit Italy. Italy was going wild and all the lockdowns. And Italy is the first Amazon country where it hit us as well. And we were, of course, in Italy. This might happen in Italy. That's true. It's probably a local issue in Italy. And for us, it gave evidence on how markets react to this. What are people buying if they're locked in their homes? How is demand? How is supply? How do you manage this? And then I actually recall early March, so exactly 6 years ago, I was on a mountaineering trip remotely for 3 days. No cell phone reception. So when we got cell phone again, Austria was in full lockdown. All the streets were empty, and the mountaineering trip was in Austria, so everything was kind of full lockdown. There was this Ischgl skiing party spreader event in Austria, and then basically Europe locked down within a couple of weeks, and you could see that pattern that we were able to study in Italy replicate to other markets,
Right.
and use that as a blueprint to prepare.
Now, you described this, and I should make it clear again. At that time, you were heading the global logistics for Amazon, which is the largest retailer in the world, and at a time that, as we now know, was about to have the biggest ever boom in terms of the demand, and also the biggest ever stretch on its supply. And you were responsible for this. You had to make sure that hundreds of millions of products, probably billions of products, were dispatched all over the world to the right people at the right time. Now, if it was me, Max, I would probably go back to the mountain and hide.
No option. No option for this.
But so you come back from your mountain trip and you're like, okay, let's get started.
And I was about to tell them about my mountain trip, and then figuring out, hey, it kind of, basically everything changed. And to give you an idea on the complexity that we are talking about, I was responsible for availability. Availability is one of the core pillars of the Amazon retail business. So that products, when you go online, visiting the store, are available for shipment, ready to buy. Now, we are talking about 70 million products, so different
SKUs, as they call it. The different types of products. 70 million products.
Product page 1, product page 2, product page 3, like all of those products, 70 million products was what I was responsible for. We're talking about 1 billion clicks every week, so very substantial clicks. We are talking about coordinating 400 departments kind of globally to deliver best availability possible.
Right.
And then COVID hit.
And then COVID hit. So I hope you all understand at this point that when Stefan says that the leaders who come here, that they have to deal with complexity, that he wasn't exaggerating, right? I mean, 70 million products. I don't even know in what kind of a shop you could fit the 70 million products, but certainly not in any supermarket, I suppose. So let's just get through that. What do you actually do? I mean, like, where do you begin? Do you then say, we can't do everything, so we prioritize? Is that how it works? And then what did you decide to prioritize?
So luckily, you don't start with zero. So you're not prepared for COVID, but you're, of course, prepared to run this complexity on a day-to-day basis. So what we have done, and that was basically the innovation that I've done in the years leading up to this, was going away from firefighting. Because if you have 70 million products, you can be the best firefighter in the world, but you'll never fight all those fires. And there's no way to deal with that. And rather focus on building systems. We are all investing. Amazon was all about building systems instead of fighting incidences. So the system in this case was basically a machine that took those 1 billion clicks every week, going through each and every of those who were not available, going back through in time to see what went wrong in the history of that product, that in this point in time when the customer wanted it, was clicking on the product, led to the fact that we are not available. You're doing this for those 1 billion clicks every week, for those 70 million products. You're applying algorithms, and then you're giving them a form, and you're allocating it to the right people. So be it the forecasting team, be it the buying team, be it vendor teams across the globe, so that they can spend their time well to improve availability.
Right.
And that's the system then that we were building on when responding to COVID.
Now, when you talk about that, I noticed that there is, you're already talking about algorithms, you're already talking about intelligence, artificial intelligence, and you're also still stressing the human aspect of this. You know, you have made certain priorities in terms of building the system, and at the end of the day, whatever this system can come up with does go to a person leading a team being responsible for certain things. And so you have sort of an interplay there between man and machine. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because for me, basically, if I was running a store at the time, I'd probably just be calling the local maker of toilet paper and say, can you please get me some toilet paper? But that's not how it went, of course.
There were also people calling the toilet paper manufacturer, especially in Germany. That was the biggest thought after good. But there were many other things to do. I think the new thing in COVID was that suddenly demand was spiking. It was very clear within days, within weeks, that Amazon is a clear winner in that COVID period. So demand was going up, and at the same time, supply was going down. People being in lockdown, and lockdown is okay if you're an office worker, but if you're a shop floor worker, if you're a delivery worker, that's much harder to deal with. Yeah? There were a lot of sick leaves, so you've suddenly had constrained capacity for all that supply, for all that demand. And what we have then done is we have defined a set of critical SKUs.
Critical goods.
Yeah, critical goods that we prioritized.
Now, and I suppose those would have been medical supplies and all of these things that people really need. Okay, so thank you for taking us back into that time. Now, another question I have when I hear you speak like that, I'm sure that if we would have gone through the room and said, what do you think Max has done in his career, very few people would have guessed that you would have been responsible for global supply at Amazon during the biggest ever boom of maybe any company ever. And perhaps one of the reasons why few people would have guessed is that you're also Max from Munich at the same time as you are that person being responsible at that time of that global supply. So take us back in time. When did you arrive in Munich?
Yeah, I came to Munich for my studies. That was 2001. I studied basically around the block, business and computer science at TU Munich.
And you obviously come from Germany, I suppose?
Yes.
I always wondered because your name is Maximilian, and so that's a pretty German, even Bavarian name.
It is a Bavarian name. It is a long-term favorite in Bavaria.
So you study here in Munich, and then you have to make a decision that a lot of people here have to make, which is what am I going to do next? And you chose for a rather conventional company, a strategy consulting firm called at the time Boozing and Company, now called Strategy End. Why did you choose at that time just to stay the conventional route?
Yeah, that was actually an interesting point, especially looking back. It is a very crucial point, the first job that you decide for. Going back in time, I finished my studies in computer science and business in Munich. I actually went to China for a year studying Chinese. There was a time when China was growing like hell. There were plenty of opportunities. So I was really dealing with, should I start in China for probably a large German company, building their Chinese business, or do I go back to Germany? And ultimately, I thought the first years in my career, they will be the foundation for how I will work in the future. They will be the time when I or build my professional standards, where I learn how to solve problems, how to communicate with stakeholders. So I wanted to have the ultimate challenge there in this regard, and not face too much cross-cultural challenge.
Make sure
So
that you could learn
I-
as much in a shorter period of time, get the crucial skills that you need, the foundations to then build a career.
Optimized learning trajectory is, I guess, the number one tip for the early career. Try to look for the best possible coaching, for the best possible learning curve. And for me, that was consulting. And it turned out to be true. It was day one, I was staffed on a project. Day two, I was traveling to the client, going up the executive floor, sitting in my first executive meeting, and what's even worse, recognizing that I was introduced as being an expert on this project, but it was my second day in consulting.
Right.
And then you have those expectations, and you constantly try to live up to those expectations. And that's what really fueled this learning curve for me in consulting.
And that's why they say the learning curve in consulting is so high, because you get thrown in on the deep end. You immediately you give this example of the second day on the job, going to the executive floor. You know, that's clearly a test for you, but also a moment to learn. And so you get out of those years exactly what you wanted. You did it for a couple of years. That's when the learning curve is the highest. And then you basically make a new decision in your career. In your case, unbeknownst to you, the choice that you made was to meet me.
True.
Because at that time you decided to go to New York and to spend a semester at Columbia University. I was there at the same time, and we studied there together. Obviously, afterwards, you went on to do fantastic things. And in fact, at that time also or shortly after, a year after, was when you started working for for Swarovski.
I moved from consulting into operations.
Yeah. And so this shift is a very interesting one, because a lot of people who would go to the United States would perhaps say, my first goal now is to get a job in the US. Or they might say, my goal is to have a big jump in my earnings, or something like that. But you chose I'm going to go to a new industry, I'm going to do something new and different, and I am, even though it wasn't that far to go to Austria, I'm going to go and work, as maybe some people know, but some people won't know, but Swarovski, the crystals, of course, it's legitimately an Austrian-based company. It's deep into the mountains. It's actually based in a mountain town.
It is.
That's where the crystals are actually originally from. So how did you make the decision to say, I'm now going to work for Swarovski? Did you want Swarovski's crystals, or your wife wanted Swarovski crystals? Was that the reason? Or
she was pretty happy about this move as well, for sure. No, that was actually my move from consulting into industry. And I think that was motivated by two things. One is, we talked about this learning curve. And that, like I talked about the first project being thrown into that project. And that repeated on every 2 or 3 months. You have a new project, new industry, new client, new team, new city. And you repeat this. And at one point in time, the curve is flattening. You have done this, you have seen this. You ought to specialize on one client, on one industry. That took away the colors from consulting out of the picture for me. The second piece was actually a client conversation. One of my clients, 1 year after the project, invited me back to Zurich, to Switzerland. And this time, he presented me a milestone chart. And he actually pulled out the milestone chart from the project that I have written a year back.
Confronted you with
confronted me.
what you said that he was supposed to go and do and achieve.
Exactly. Yeah, and as a consultant, you leave that slide and you go to the next project. And you assume that slide was really, really, really smart. And then he confronted me with that slide. And he showed me, this worked out well, this didn't work out, and here's a picture of the product that we have developed. And here's like, he was standing next to a machine, and I was like, wow. That's going beyond slides into reality, into realizing this, taking ownership, taking real leadership for things.
Did you discuss with Stefan before coming on stage? Because that's now the second time that you say exactly what he said we were going to be doing, and I didn't notice. I didn't notice. You said we were going to go from slides to actual doing things in the work life. Very well.
I realized that in this meeting, and that made me. I need to own this. I need to make decisions myself. I want to lead stuff. And I first then went to Swarovski and doing their operations, also availability, inventory management, which was nice. It was big enough to be interesting. It was small enough so that I can assume kind of end-to-end ownership, being my first leadership position. But then after, I think, 3 years, I was ready to
take the next step.
To switch playing field and grow up, and that's when I joined Amazon then.
Maybe one final question on Swarovski, because of course it is an iconic company. I mean, like most of the people here will know it, maybe have a crystal at home. And it's therefore probably also for the size of the company, I suppose it's a company that has at most a few billion in sales, not more than that. So for the size of the company, it is outsized in terms of its branding and how people know it and how people want to work there. So what made you stand out that people at Swarovski were like, we want Max to come and work for us, and that you stood out from all the other candidates?
I was actually working as a consultant for Swarovski before that.
So you knew them.
So they knew me, and they approached me.
It's something I think that is worth just pointing out, because that's how it often goes. You know, like when you look at a CV, you know, you might say, wow, they worked for that amazing company and that for that amazing company, and how does that actually work? And in reality, it's often because of connections that already exist. And in this case, it turns out it was one of those situations. Now, on to the moment again, the Amazon moment. Amazon, of course, it is one of the top 3, top 5 biggest companies in the world. This is one of those trillion-dollar companies. And if many people want to work for Swarovski, then probably many, many, many more people want to work for Amazon, and certainly in a global role. And I would assume that most of them would come from the US, or at least work in the Seattle headquarters, which is on the Pacific coast. So what's the story behind that? How did you make the jump from Swarovski to Amazon in a global role?
I didn't start in a global role. So I first joined the EU fashion team in Amazon, which is somewhat related to the crystal
the
business,
luxury.
so in terms of buying cycles, that has some commonality. But then after a year, I took over EU availability, so the European part of the availability, and then worked my way up. And I was actually about to move to Seattle when COVID hit.
When COVID hit. And I suppose that's another lesson that we can all learn, is that, you know, another way to grow is when you grow within a company. And you can get to that global role at a large company like that, but perhaps the way in, as it was also for you, is, you know, in Germany or in Europe, join the local or the regional team, you know, build your connections, build your track record, and then opportunities will come. And of course, in your case, it ended in this amazing, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be in that moment when the company had the biggest crunch on its supply ever, and you were supposed to solve it. Now, you told us how you did that. Now, I would think, after you've done that, you know, now maybe the next step is, why don't I try to join the executive committee of Amazon? And why don't I, now that COVID is gone, now I move to Seattle? Why did you decide at that point, after a number of years of working at Amazon and achieving so many things there, why did you then say, you know what, let me start again from scratch? Because your next move was to leave Amazon and start your own company?
Good question. Yes. That's
You still wonder that every day.
no. I think it's because it was for me. I'm a very rational person. Yeah, I mean, we talked about managing 70 million products, a billion clicks. You need to like data for this. But this choice was a highly emotional choice. It was about becoming an entrepreneur. And for me, entrepreneurship so I came to entrepreneurship as it was a dream of mine. It was a long-term dream of mine. I studied in Munich, also at the CDTM. Some of you might have come across this. It's an institute run by two Munich universities that became now really famous for entrepreneurship. Kind of a lot of unicorns came out of CDTM. And so this piece of entrepreneurship, of founding a company, of doing your own thing was always glamorized in my circle. And this was somewhat on my list,
Right.
I must confess.
And so you felt, okay, I've now built enough of a track record. I actually know how to create value because you've done that at Swarovski, you've done that at Amazon at the highest level.
Yeah.
And so you felt, I think I've got something to add here.
Yeah, that is one point. And the second point is opportunity. So it was a dream, but then there's also coincidence. It's very much underestimated, I think, in careers.
Serendipity.
Is coincidence. A good friend of mine and colleague from consulting time was bouncing back and forth some ideas, and he wanted to go into cardiovascular disease prevention and building a digital therapy for cardiovascular patients. And that idea really struck with me. And I thought, if I ever want to found a company in my life, it's now or never. So within one of those lockdowns, I was actually submitting my resignation. I still remember, I mean, you talk about it, but then there's also the formal paper that you submit. I still remember the day when I was packing my two kids. I had two young kids, aged 1 and 3, so pretty young at this time. I was packing them in my trolley and the bike. I was cycling to the Amazon office here, submitting that paper envelope. And I really had sweaty hands when cycling there because I thought, probably it's either a very bad decision or it's a very good decision. And that was the only moment where I had a bit of self-doubt, but then, I plugged it in and was done.
And it turned out to be a good decision. But it's true, of course, that when you have, when you stay in the corporate track, one of the advantages, certainly when you have a family, is that there is a certain stability. There may be a COVID crisis breaking out, and it may be very disruptive to the entire world, but at least at Amazon, you had, at the end of the month, that security of the paycheck.
And it's a clear Corona winner.
And of course, especially when you have young children, you think about that because you feel responsibility. It's all great that you're building a great career, but you want to make sure that you do the right thing also for your family. And so that explains the sweaty hands at that moment.
Yes, and I was fast forwarding to me, aged 80, sitting in an armchair and reflecting on my life.
We're doing it now, so
yeah,
we're quicker than
on
age
the first
80.
part. Yeah,
So
not yet 80, not yet 80.
You can scratch that off the bucket list.
But I really thought about this. It's now or never. If I don't dare now, I don't think you start a company first time founding at the age of 60 or 55.
Right. There are exceptions.
At one point in time.
But of course, you feel like
you got to do it.
In your career, you feel like now you've really built up all these moments where you've learned enough. But you also know, if I'm not doing it now, this is why it feels like a now or never moment. There will be ever more at stake when you do it later and later and later. Yes. And so you did it then. How is it going now? You're still happy with the choice? Is Vantis turning out what you hoped it would be?
Yeah, I'm still very happy with the choice. Yeah, I'm glad that I did it. Yeah, that I took the risk. But as you can imagine, as every entrepreneurship, it turned out entirely different than we planned it. It's like
Right.
just kind of you
had one
envision
idea.
this, and then you end up there. Yeah.
Right. Now, it sounds like you're doing really well. I certainly know that we've already learned a lot from you just in the short space of time. Maybe one final question is, you've walked us through all the amazing things you've done in your career. You showed us a little bit here and there, sort of the personal aspect, how it comes in, whether because you were in the mountains and probably mountaineering or because you were with your kids and so on. How do you find the balance between those two lives, your professional life and your personal life?
That's really tricky. That's really tricky. So I basically, when I think about life is for me much bigger than just work. I segment it, and I realized this especially when my kids were born. Yeah, that's a game changer. Before kids, I had work, and I had a little bit myself to manage, and my partner. But it broadly fits into a 24-hour day. Yeah? But when kids come in, it doesn't just fit anymore.
Doesn't add up anymore.
So you have this pillar family, myself, and I have a large set of hobbies. I'm actually passionate about rock climbing, big walls, ski mountaineering, free diving, cold, breath holding. Like I try.
It reminds me. Your hobbies remind me of this song, "So Many Ways to Die." It's okay.
Not yet. And then work. And the first thing that you think is you have to choose one. And if you observe people, it's always easy to say, they are putting more efforts into work. They are and they are outpacing you at one point in time. Or they are putting more effort in their family, and they are a better father, maybe, than you think you are. Or they are a better athlete. But at one point, I tried to get away from this black-white, one thing or another thing, and choosing and. So you can be an entrepreneur and a good father and a reasonable athlete. Yeah? And to consciously make the decision to say, hey, my life is bigger than just work, and I need to somewhat fit this into the 24 hours, and also accept here and there that you won't be a Champions League athlete,
right?
But you can still be a very, very happy athlete.
I've found that out myself. Last year, just before the Learning from Leaders conference, you were not on stage with me, but you did go for a run with me here in Munich. To you, probably it felt like a walk, literally in the park.
Walk.
To me, it felt like I was doing an Olympic medal performance of running. With that, Max, I want to thank you for spending this really, really inspiring time with us. And please give a warm applause to Max Roedel.
Thank you.
Well done. That was fantastic. I suppose, Max, that you are still planning to go for rock climbing or something because you have the right gear for it.
I'm always prepared.
I hope, though, that you will stay with us for a little longer because we're going to go straight into the next conversation. So I think as a rock climber, you'll be able to get down the stairs. And we're going to ask now our second speaker to come up. I want to say I really appreciated sitting here at this side by hearing how fascinated everyone in the audience was. I know it goes all the way to the back, and I really want to appreciate everybody here. I hope you all feel it, that you all feel the connection. We'll have one more speaker right now. Afterwards, we will take a short break, so please bear with us and give a really warm welcome to Virginie Darbo of Holcim.
So from the mountain climber to the high hill, so that's
right.
That's the transition.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I guess you would join me in not being so successful as Max is in the rock climbing with this gear. But you do actually live in the mountains or abouts, right? Or very close to them. I think you live in Zug, Switzerland. Is that right, Virginie?
That's true. Actually, the family is in Zurich, but the head office of the company, the global head office, is in Zug, Switzerland, correct.
Now, I want to ask you about all the amazing things that Holcim has done and that you have done at Holcim in the last couple of years. But unlike, you have one drawback versus Max. You know, Max worked for Swarovski and he worked for Amazon. I think that speaks immediately to the imagination of the audience. Maybe Holcim doesn't have that same effect as Swarovski does. So I should perhaps ask you as a first question just to tell us a little bit more about what exactly Holcim is and what it does. Mm-hmm. We know it's an amazing and a very, very big company, but what does it do exactly?
Holcim is the leading partner for sustainable construction. Sustainable construction is about building schools, hospitals, bridges, connecting all of us, tunnels in Switzerland, of course, that we have plenty of these. And you look at me, you know, the French lady, what do I do in a construction building material companies for 22 years? It's actually that, you know, connection to the basics, because all of us, we live in homes, we have roofs and walls around us, and this is made of concrete most of the time, or any other building solution material. So that's about Holcim, and it's about, in all these years, shifting also the world of the basic concretes and building materials into sustainable construction, having more decarbonized materials, recycled materials, so that we are also part of, building progress for the people and planet, and this is Holcim vision.
Right, and Holcim, you were a little bit modest about it, but Holcim is, or was, prior to the demerger we'll talk about, by some measures, the largest such company in the entire world.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a scale of, I suppose, more than 100,000 employees, many billions in revenue in euros or Swiss francs or dollars. What are some of the key figures of Holcim today and yesterday?
So today, and you mentioned that, Holcim actually did something last year that very few companies have done, if any, is to spin off the company on a geographic base. So you may study in your finance course about what it is to spin off. Some big companies, conglomerates, sometimes they spin off a business line to create more value of that business line. What we did at Holcim is that we spun off a geography. So North America, composed of the US and Canada, was spun off in a separate company. And so Holcim remains as a company based out in Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East and North Africa. The company today, and we speak about Swiss francs because this is where we are, it's about 15.7 billion Swiss francs revenue. It's 43 countries around the world. It's 45,000 employees.
Wow.
So that's the magnitude. And we are still leaders somehow because we are leader when it comes to profitability. We have an industry-leading margin, so EBIT margin is 18.3%.
Right, now you're really testing the knowledge of the audience here, and I'm sure that the finance professors and the accounting professors will be very happy that you mentioned EBIT, which is earnings before interest and taxes.
Wow.
I think, do I get an A from that response?
Yeah,
okay,
well
that's
done.
great. But so Holcim is a huge company, and you also have a huge role at that company, because as you mentioned, just a year ago, the company split basically into two, which is a very odd and special thing to do, because as you say, normally, if there is something that's spun off, it's a side part of the business, not the company into two pieces. That's almost like a Greek mythology kind of thing, that you split a person into two. And your role was what exactly?
Yeah. So today I'm a member of the executive committee of Holcim in charge of strategy and M&A.
And M&A, we have to pause, it means mergers and acquisitions.
Acquisition, so acquisitions and divestiture to make it more, straight. So acquiring, buying business and selling businesses. And in the past 2 years, I have orchestrated the formulation and the launch of the new strategy as Holcim as a new company. So it was a fascinating moment, me and together with a group of ours to tell the story. Because a strategy, it's about, at the very beginning, it's about telling a story. What do we want to do as a company? Who we are? Where are we going? And how are we going to do? And the story has to be exciting, because we want the shareholders to invest in the company. But also the story has to be credible, because we make promises in the strategy, how much we're going to deliver. And this has to be sound and supported by facts and figures. And at the end of the day, it has to be also true to the company culture, because the strategy lives by execution. So you can have a very beautiful story, but if you have nobody to live and execute the strategy, then you go nowhere. So you need also to embark all the 45,000 employees of the company to make it happen. So that's the role I had today.
It's a fascinating way to put it, because I was first thinking, when you have a role like that, and especially when I suppose you have a great background also in finance, you talked about numbers and about margins and about profits and about all those things. I would think, the story starts with the financial part, and you say, no, actually it starts with the story part.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting. Now, of course, I'm sure that the numbers have to fit, and that everything has to be correct in the spreadsheet or whatever we use nowadays. Mm-hmm. But even at that level, even at that highest level, when you make such a big decision for a company, mm-hmm. it's about telling a story. Mm-hmm. Now, what was the story that you told, Virginie?
The story is, so we had to find, okay, how do we want to identify ourselves? And the leading partner for sustainable construction. And I go word by word, because every word was carefully selected, chosen. Should we say a leader or the leader? Should we, this kind of thing. So, and this is something that we have really worked deeply. And every word counts, because it's about leadership, it's about sustainability, it's about construction that really identify ourselves. So that has been very strong from the beginning.
I suppose that the construction part I could have come up with, since you are a construction materials company, but the sustainability one is rather surprising. Yeah. Because, of course, if you look at Holcim, and many people have, and you have for many years, you know that the construction materials in the world represent one of the largest footprints of, both actual resources use and a very critical factor, which is CO2 emissions and other emissions. It's so big, and you know this, of course, since many years because you looked into it, but maybe people in the room don't know that to what extent the construction materials can either increase or decrease the kind of carbon we put into the air. It can increase it basically because building takes emissions, and it can decrease it because if you isolate in the right way, you don't have to use energy. So for you, this whole idea of being a sustainable construction company was key. How is this key, and how did you make this credible? Because you talked about the credibility.
Yeah. So indeed, it has been an important question, and actually sustainability at Holcim is not something new. This is something that we live for the past 20 years. And we decided also to stay true to ourselves, because we strongly believe that, as you said, as a building material and solution companies, we can have an impact also in a positive way in transforming the construction industry through our innovations. And innovation is very much at the core of everything we do at Holcim. And we believe we can change the things and shape actually the industry towards a good direction, and this has been the reality. Most of our innovations, we have some happy followers and some also other companies doing the same, because innovating helps us to decrease the carbon content in the materials, increase the circularity. So this has been something that has been transformative in the industry, is how to take a piece of concrete when we don't use it anymore and a building is demolished or a road is being repaired. We take it in our site, we crush it, we wash it, and we reuse it. Yeah. So that we also want to have innovative technologies so that we can promote circularity. And as you mentioned at the end, we also innovate with new building materials in solution to have more energy efficient solution, because as a matter of fact, you know, electricity cost is increasing in our homes. We want to reduce the electricity bill, but we also want to have more comfort, you know, in the summertime. Right. I'm sure here, even in Munich, sometimes you have some heat waves, so you want to have better insulation in the building. So innovation in the industry also helps better insulation, and therefore for the home user, right, less cost in energy and more comfort.
And so now I started to see why you talk about the importance of this story. Because of course, Holcim may have been something at one point in time, and it is now becoming something else. Not just because it's splitting into two companies, but also because of the core of what the company does. Even if it still makes concrete, it's a different type of concrete. And that means that you can put it in the market differently, and you can become a very different type of company. Now, the other part that you do is you still do M&A, you still do mergers and acquisitions, and even though you just did the biggest move ever in the corporate history, and probably one of the biggest demergers in the world ever, you're already starting to buy new companies. Why is that? Why is it so that a company constantly has to evolve and sell something and buy something? How come it cannot just stay what it is?
As I mentioned in the strategy, we had some financial ambition, because it's not only the story, it's about also promising some growth to the shareholders and attractive returns. And part of the promise is to grow the revenue, to grow the profits. So then when you make this promise, then again, back to the credibility is how to make it happen. And when you launch a strategy, even though we put some targets for ourselves until the year 2030, if we go to the shareholders and tell them, you know, wait a moment, in 5 years from now it's going to come. No, that's very unlikely that you will attract investors. So very quickly, you have to make credible moves that are giving comfort to the shareholders that you are moving in the right direction. And if you make these moves very early, in the 5 years period between the launch in 25 and the target in 2030, most likely then you will capture also the growth of the business you acquire. So that's very important, to give credibility to the story, but also to put the company in the best position to leverage the business that we acquire. So now, what about buying and selling? Part of the strategy, the pillar number 1 of Holcim strategy, it's called focused investment in the most attractive market. So focused investment, then you would figure it out that it can be either building a new plant or buying a new company through M&A. But the second part of the sentence, the most attractive market, also matters, meaning that we also do a portfolio review on a regular basis, and we defined what for Holcim is the most attractive market, not today, but today, tomorrow, and in the coming decade. And if we believe that there is a market for all sorts of reasons that might not be the most attractive market for us, then it's the right time also to exit the market at the best condition, find a new owner that will also treasure this business in a better way, and redeploy the capital into a better or more attractive market to finance the M&A. So that's about capital allocation.
This is really, I think, as close as you can get to a practical definition of capitalism. You deploy capital, and you do that in a way that you maximize the returns.
Yes.
And that can either mean that you sell a part of your business where the returns are not attractive or will not be attractive anymore in the future, or it can mean you deploy capital, you buy something new where the returns are expected to be higher. Now let's make that one more step concrete. If you look at the last 2 years where you've been very active in exactly this, the M&A and also the selling, what are sort of 1 or 2 examples on each side? Markets that you've exited and new businesses that you've bought.
A few years back, the group made the decision to exit Sub-Saharan Africa. Not because there is a lot of population growing, so some of the market fundamentals are there, but Holcim wanted to develop in some other regions and thought that maybe in Sub-Saharan Africa was not the place to stay in the future. So we were in many countries, so step by step, country by country, we find new owners for those businesses. So that was a strategic thinking, and it has been executed, year after year to exit all the countries. Last year, we completed the divestment of Nigeria, which was
huge market, but
huge market, huge growth population, fundamentals. So, but actually, we were not probably the best owner in the long run
because of the fact that you say, again, every part of our story matters. We want to be the leader in sustainable construction, and it turns out that in some markets, you cannot be the leader in sustainable construction.
Absolutely. So that's
and that's why you sell. And then you've also bought businesses.
Yeah, exactly. So again, in the strategy, it was this one focused investment on the most attractive market. Pillar number 2, sustainability driving profitable growth. So back to the sustainability, it's not only because it's the right thing to do, but also it makes perfect business sense. So we also do believe strongly in sustainability and profitability. And the third pillar is about expanding to high-value building solutions. So this is the transformational piece of the strategy. So in the strategy, it's like a movie. You have the sad moments, the happy moments, the emotional, the highs and the lows. And in the strategy, we have all sorts of exciting moments, but one part, which is more how the company is transforming, and this is the pillar, the growth in the high-value building solution. So our heritage legacy is more cement and aggregates, so the stones. This is what we call the building materials. This is the majority of the business today. And we want to expand into high-value building solution, more energy-efficient solution, for example. And here also to make...
What's an example of that as a product?
An example is the company that we bought here in Germany. We made the acquisition of a company called Xela. So it's Ytong blocks. Many people maybe know those blocks. It's aerated concrete blocks to build walls. Okay? So we said instead of casting concrete to build walls in a traditional manner, we have a more modular construction way. So you buy these blocks, a little bit like Lego type, and then you build the walls. And those walls are actually the thermal efficiency and the acoustic insulation is very good. It brings modular construction, meaning a new way of building. Instead of having concrete trucks in the middle of a city, then you have these pallets of blocks that then the construction is faster and requires less labor, which we believe is also a mega trend of the future, a shortage of skilled labor. That's why we want to have solution to build faster, efficiently, and with less waste. Because when you build a wall with those Ytong blocks, you just buy the quantity of blocks that the designer, it's all about digital solution behind that, and a designer will tell you exactly how many blocks do you need, and you just buy that. So you don't create waste on the construction site. So very efficient. So we did this
I can see that it must be very exciting to you because you talk about it in a very energetic way. This was a big acquisition. This was more than €1 billion, perhaps?
1,850 million euro, yes.
Yeah, so really not a small business, one of those key acquisitions that you've made. Thank you for telling us about your job. I think it's very fascinating. Now, one more thing I want to ask you about your current job, and then I want to go back in time and get to know the Virginie, perhaps when she was the age of all the other students here. The last question I have is, you know, you are also, of course, at one of those top positions in a top company. Holcim, we already talked about it, huge company, you know, a Fortune 500 company, and you're at the executive committee level. A final aspect of, like, Virginie, you are great at M&A, you are great at storytelling, but you're also great in talking with other people. Because you said one of the key things for me is I have to be able to work well with the other executive committee and with the CEO, the leader of the company. And for them, it's also important that they can operate as a team and that they have a person in that position that you're in, that they know and that they trust. Tell us a little bit about the importance when you get at that level in a company of having that interpersonal trust and that team building that people talk about.
Yeah, that's essential. When you want to launch a strategy, what we did last year, it's hours and hours of you know, being in the room, thinking, and to come up with something. It's, I don't know how many iterations we had. I stopped counting at some point. But you have to be in a brainstorming environment with colleagues, including the top CEO and the top team. So you need trust and respect in the room. Trust in a sense that everybody trusts each other, that, you know, we are here to contribute, we have ideas, and with the intention to do the good things, not to have, you know, individual proof like I have a better idea.
I have the best idea, exactly. Or you have the worst idea, or...
So trust and respect are fundamental and essential rule in a teamwork, because then it encourages dialogue, sharing, and there could be bad ideas, wrong ideas, but we have to go through this process of you know, building this environment where we all contribute. And of course, this comes from deep individual values that we have, but it comes also from experience of working together with different teams, different culture, and that is the...
And one aspect there is that, you told me this, that prior to the big move at the M&A of Holcim, that the current CEO, the global CEO currently, was the CEO of Europe, region Europe, and that you, at the time, were also in his team as with a regional responsibility for Europe. And so that personal bond, that trust and that respect, then also meant, of course, that as a team in Europe, you were able to grow into that global leading team.
That's true.
Now, Virginie, now I said I wanted to go take a step back to the Virginie of a couple of years ago. That was the age of the students are now. When you were in your early 20s, did you know or hope that you would become one day the chief strategy officer of a Fortune 500 company?
I had no idea. No. Actually, I graduated exactly. I just realized it was 30 years ago in '96. I had no idea about what job I would have, but I had one dream and conviction is that I will travel the world. This was really my ambition, to have international opportunities in the different jobs I would have.
And you were, at the time, to be clear, you were French. You had.
I'm still
French. But you came from, I think, a small town, a little bit like the movie Belle and the Beast. You came from a small town in France.
True.
And then you went to the big town, which was Paris, to study.
Yeah.
But that was not enough for you. You felt, I have to go away from even France.
Absolutely. It's that was a little girl dream.
And then I was surprised to see on your CV that actually your first job was not what I thought it would be, namely like that you would go and take your bags and travel halfway around the world. But you actually started in a rather conventional job also, in a consulting firm or something, a service firm in France, in Paris.
Yeah, and I would echo what Max said earlier. The first job, I spent some years at, not the first, but let's say the second job, I spent some years at Deloitte. And this was very important in my early years, because I would say there are three key pillars who made the leader I am today. Number one is the education I received from my parents in that small village. And this I remember every day, where I'm coming from, what they gave to me, the love, the trust, the self-confidence, the go-girl type of attitude. This is fundamental, and that is essential, I would say. And now as a mother, I try, because it's not easy to be a parent, but I try to have
Model
this
that
impact.
back, yeah.
Exactly. The second is that in those years at Deloitte, it's about complementary to the university. It's about hard work, discipline, sense of details, never give up, work hard, but also, receiving the feedback from the first managers. This has gave me the discipline, the rigor that made me a financial leader later on. And now, I'm still the one, checking the commas and the dots at the end or footing the additions. So this years gave me this discipline. And then the third element that is when I decided to really go abroad and travel. And this is where I learned, okay, working in the different culture, and then you forget about what you studied at school or your culture. You have to reinvent yourself every day.
The intercultural part. I want to talk about that because I know that you truly did travel the world. But I want to say one more thing about this aspect that Max and you talked about. These first few years where you actually do focus on the hard skills, and you work hard, and, you have that steep learning curve. I do want to say, and I've had a similar experience, that does come sometimes with its personal costs. Sometimes you work many, many hours, and that's not always fun. No. And it may mean at some point, some people may decide, this is not for me. I don't want to have that imbalance between my personal life and my professional life. I remember one friend of mine who worked at McKinsey at the time, and she told me the moment that I decided to quit was when I went to the bathroom to cry. And I said, I can't have this life. So I just want to say this because we're also here to learn from leaders, and you two are examples of people who have been able to maximize those 2, 3, 4 years in the beginning of the career, to work hard, to learn a lot, and you got through it on the other end. But I think it's also important to say it's okay that if along the way you're like, you know what, this is not what I'm looking for, that you can also go on a different track before that. Now, Virginie, now after the moment that you decide to go off that track, because even if I go to your LinkedIn, all in a sudden you see there a moment that says, career break, I went off to Mexico.
Yeah, true. And this is like the career break. I just started to work 2 years, and I said I need a break. So nothing. It was more. I wanted to have an experience. It was more, and also because I was young, and I said, okay, let me do this before I get into these circles that I don't want to stop. Yeah, because when I was a student, I didn't have the opportunity to study abroad or to have Erasmus type of things. So I said, okay, I want to try before it's getting serious, when you're giving a big job. So yes, I went to Mexico, learned Spanish, experience. It was in '98. My parents were not so happy with that. They were, like, what is going on? You just started to work, like you stop and you go.
Yeah, and of all the places, and Mexico is a beautiful country.
Yeah.
But of course, it could happen in certain regions that things happen that are not so great.
Yeah, and just in '98, there was no Zoom or even no cell phone, so it's not like they can locate you on your iPhone. They were like, okay, she goes and maybe she will call to give some news once in a while. But this was fundamental because it gave me this, this thing when sometimes you are scared, but you're excited at the same time, and you prove yourself day after day, yes, I can do it. And then it gives you a lot of strength to go into this adventure. So it made me, back in France, I said, okay, this is what I want. I want to.
And to be
go
clear,
for
at
this.
that time, it was not like you said, I'm going to go and build my career there. You really said, I want to take some time
Yes.
and do the intercultural learning.
Yes.
I want to go to another country, another place in the world. and experience that.
And it was important because actually I wanted to have a career. I didn't know that I will have the job today, but I said, I want to have this as an experience before, again, it gets serious. Because if one day I'm given the opportunity to have like a big job in whatever country,
Right.
if I say yes, I want to be sure that I will be successful at that time. And so I want to go through the, what it means really to live abroad before I say yes to a bigger job. So.
Right. And I think you also told me that at the time you did that with your partner. So that was one part that, on the personal level maybe gave you the confidence of, okay, let's do this together.
Yes.
Let's enjoy this experience. And you certainly did.
Yeah.
And then you came back. And then you said, I'm going to try to merge the two. I'm going to look for a real job where I can have a real career, but also that gives me the opportunity to do more of what I realize I really like, which is to say, to discover the world.
Yes.
So what happened then, and where did you go?
So I came back. This is when I said, okay, let's be serious now. So I joined Deloitte. I did this 4 years of, hard work, structure, rigor, and so on, because I knew I wanted to travel, but I didn't know in which industry. So Deloitte was actually, I knew I would not do a career at Deloitte. This was not my ambition at all. So that's why I was ready to, to work hard the nights, the weekends, and so on, because I know there was a beginning and an end. I took Deloitte, and again, we mentioned that earlier, to explore which industry is good for me. I would not say that it was obvious that the building material industry was like the place to be.
It's not the one that you had on the bingo card.
Exactly, but it happened at I said, okay, this customer is right, the place, because I realized that the company was buying a lot of entities abroad. So I said, okay, that's probably this company with a large international footprint plus ambition to grow internationally. This is the place I want to be.
And that was Holcim, or the predecessor, Holcim Lafarge. And so that was at the time a Swiss-French company, but with an increasing global footprint. And now you had your opportunity, because you got very soon your first chance to go abroad, not just any country abroad, but really, again, the other side. You already went west, now you went east.
Correct.
And you went to
China.
To Beijing, China.
Yeah, in 2006. So.
And you went there really to live there. You spent a number of years there.
Yeah.
So you really immersed yourself fully and embraced that experience as well.
Absolutely. So this was 20 years ago, indeed, 2006. Went there with my partner. You will discuss geopolitics later on, so I will not tell you my story, how I get married in an emergency in a French consulate in Beijing. But again, when you live abroad, and this is the connection then to the next speaker, is when you decide to live abroad, you have also, you live the world and the geopolitics. So we enter the country, and then all of a sudden things happen in the country, you just have to go through it. Anyway, cut long story short, we got married, continued to work, and in the years 4 and 5 of my assignment, my 2 kids were born in Beijing when I was there. So another day I will tell you what it is to give birth in a Chinese clinic, but that's another kind of experience.
But I mean, it does goes to show, even if you just raise a little bit of the veil, it does show that, when you make those choices, you can be really excited about the idea of global travel or building your career abroad, but then there is the reality of it. And the reality does mean that you have to fully embrace that choice. Because if it comes to it, and I suppose it was a visa issue or something like that, if you want to continue both your personal life with your partner and live in China, at the time, for you it meant we have to get married, for example.
Exactly.
And if you come at a stage in life, as everybody does, where you, or at least people, I suppose, many people do, I want to now also have a family. Well, I now live in China. I'm no longer in my safe environment, my family environment at home, the medical places that I know, and so on and so forth. And so you're going to have that experience in a country where you may speak the language, but you certainly don't know the culture or the practices. And so you went through all of that.
Yeah, and you had to... I learned Chinese a little bit when I arrived, more as a survival, not as a student like Max did, more, like a music or a song that you would repeat. But indeed, my daughter was born, I had to get back to work, and the nanny could speak only Chinese, Mandarin actually, from Anhui province. So I had to quickly learn the language, so I took at home just This is about, mixing the personal and the professional life. I wanted to go back to work. So I took Jangli, her name. She was at home, and it was, okay, I do this, you observe, you do this, I observe. We correct each other. Okay, this is milk, this is diaper, this is cream, and then you learn all the names, and you have to find very quickly, in 3 months, the smart way to learn things, because then you go back to work. And of course, the most precious, treasure that I had was my baby, and I need to be, again, it's about trust and respect. So it's about different culture, different language, but you need to find a person that you trust, respect mutually. My daughter was in a very safe hand, and she had a very happy babyhood. And then, and the brother came, and then we left to another country.
It's interesting, and you've repeated that experience afterwards. And I want to acknowledge also a lot of people in the room here come from all over the world, and they're basically experiencing what you're experiencing in the reverse way, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of people here, right, from China and from other parts of Asia, and they've come here even a few years earlier than you have gone abroad. And I'm sure that a lot of you will experience this, perhaps now not yet with the baby and the diaper and so on, but in other ways I'm sure there's equivalent. Yeah. And so we see you also, right? We appreciate that you were doing that. Would you say afterwards, that was a dream, and knowing the reality, afterwards you also went to Russia, and you also went to Algeria.
Correct.
So you really saw all the corners of the world. You lived in 4 or 5 continents. Would you say in the end it was what I had hoped for, or if it wasn't what I had hoped for, I'm happy I did all of that?
I'm super happy I did all of that. I mean, this was all sorts of, you said the different cultures, different countries, different languages, so many different things that every step you make, you learn something else. I mean, you mentioned COVID earlier. 6 years ago, I was in Algeria, North Africa, different continent, and when the decision comes, lockdown, 2 young kids, what do? We go back to Europe, we stay here, back and forth, and then in a millisecond you have to decide, because it's not like there are a lot of planes, lockdown is a lockdown. So, and we decided to stay in Algeria, because the work was there, but many families left, but there has been, and it's still the red line that I have in my professional career, is that our family, my family, is what matters the most. This is so important to me that we're never gonna get separated. Of course, one day my daughter, boy, will be like in one of those classrooms, so I have no choice. But it was like we always stay together.
Right.
So it was the choice. Okay, we stay in Algeria. We'll find our way, But yeah, there was no flight, so our parents were in Europe. We were there. We just have to take care of ourselves, and it went well.
I think that's one of the learnings that a lot of people have when they go abroad. At first, you build your social network, and when you're a student, it's about having friends. But once you have a family abroad, your family becomes really your cocoon.
Correct.
Even more than when you would stay in your own culture. And so it increases incredibly the bond that you have with those few people. And I suppose it also makes it possible to go through that adventure together.
Yes.
Maybe one reflective question on this point, you've gone through this, and a big part of your career has been during sort of the high point of globalization. When you went to China was the time that China really entered the global market. It was possible for Europeans to go there and vice versa. You were in Russia for a number of years. Obviously, that has retreated to a large degree. We now live in an era, if not of deglobalization, at least an era in which it's no longer for granted that if you come from anywhere in the world, you can go and live anywhere in the world. Now, this room is an example of people who are doing that. Do you think that it is going to remain possible to the same degree? And if it is, do you recommend it in the same degree? Or would you say, maybe times have changed and, we have to always adapt. When we have the chance to go somewhere, we do it. But if we don't have the chance, maybe we don't.
Adaptability is the key word, so that's for sure. So some things are possible now and not later or in the past, but there is always something possible. So I really, really encourage every one of you to go through this large range of opportunity and not to narrow to, okay, I'm going to do this and stay here and never move, because personally, the leader I am today, with this resilience, agility, and capability to do so many different things, talk to different people, gain the heart and minds of now a CEO and gain the trust of these great leaders, is because I learned so much from all this multicultural experience. This is a treasure, because this is when you are in a situation, in a country, again, not your culture, not your language, you come back to your instinct, which is listening, observing, feeling. And this is what you learn when you are exposed to environments which are not the one that is your comfort zone, as we say. And this is extremely precious learning that then what you experience in being in the train in the middle of Samaria or in the desert of Algeria, this like, okay, I don't understand what is going on. Then one day you are in an executive meeting room and you are in a difficult either strategic or performance review, and this is where you are back to this, like, okay, what is going on in the room? Who is stressed, who is comfort, who is right, and then in a different business environment, all these learnings that you get from those multicultural experience gives you this confidence and this set of skills. So I highly encourage this for anyone who has the opportunity.
It's very encouraging, and it's also encouraging to know that there's always an opportunity.
Yes.
Because of course today we live in a world where you wonder, is that still the case, and will that still be the case? I want to see if perhaps before we end, we just have one or two questions from the audience. Is that possible? I'm just having a quick look. I think it should be possible. Do we have a microphone? I think we have one here. I will get it. So I think we'll have time for one or two questions. So if you have one, I'll take one here and I'll take one there. I see a person over there. And is there somebody here maybe? We'll start with that one question and then the second question there. And tell us maybe who you are and then ask your question. So we've got it was right here and over there. Sorry, right here and over there. Yeah. Yeah. There we go. Go on.
Okay, the microphone is working.
Maybe we have to push it on, I think. And then I think we're fine.
Is it now working?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, first of all, thank you very much for your inspiring
maybe it's
stories.
still not working. Can you have a quick look?
More closer?
Yeah,
oh,
perfect.
Perfect,
okay.
now better.
First of all, thank you very much for your inspiring story. My name is Miguel Miranda. I'm also teaching here at the EU Business School. And one thing that I observed upon many students is I do sometimes surveys with students, and one thing that I find out in the surveys, like what is the number thing that is struggling most, and that is the topic of procrastination. So you've mentioned as well within your story that you developed a law of discipline. I took you a note that you mentioned that very often, the word. And my question to you is, what are the top 3 things you would advise to students to actually develop this discipline, overcome procrastination, and achieve the things similar to what you have achieved?
That's a great question. And we're going to take the second question as well. Go ahead.
Hello, so my name is Rohit Kalotra, and thank you for your insights, beautiful insights. So I am a student of Masters in data science, so I would like to ask you a question that how AI currently, because in almost all the business sectors, organizations, there's a wave of AI. How AI and data-driven decisions, basically, strategies, in an organization over the next 5 to 6 years, how it's going to impact on the decisions or transform the decisions of any organization.
Excellent, thank you. So discipline and AI, let's see where we can go with that.
Okay, so a few advice, if I can, or at least sharing again one more experience is in this discipline that I mentioned a few times, it's more about first of all, and the word procrastination that you use, there is always, I strongly believe that there is always a solution. So never get stuck and just find a way. And I always try and fail. You may read sometimes some companies don't really like it, some companies encourage it, but try. Find a way, but try solutions and be convinced that there is a way. So, and from this experience, even if you don't have, I was not born strategist, but I said, okay, let's just make it happen and try again and again and again and again. And this is also part of the discipline, is not to, get desperate or give up at the very first trial. So, and then also this is number one. And the second is, when you do at work, I always say something, is that what I do or what we do is very serious, but we should never take ourselves too seriously. And that is helping us to go back to humility, remember where you're coming from, and just, we have to do the things in the best way we can, but don't get sick of it, just don't get obsessed with, it has to be the absolute perfection. And I know sometimes I'm very perfectionist, but just move, and at the end what matters is again the storytelling. You have to get the emotions of the people, because investors, yes, they define about the numbers, but the storytelling is equally important. So this has to also reflect in the way you work, as get something smooth. And that, back to this culture experience that I had, this is something that has been my universal language in any country of the world, is the smile. Because in any country, there is no language for, a happy face. You have a happy face, people understand, that's good. You have a no happy face, people really understand, okay, it doesn't look good. So just allow yourself discipline, but also get your emotions to try and try again and make it happen.
Excellent. So, and then maybe briefly on AI?
Briefly on the AI. Of course, AI is everywhere at Holcim. The way we embrace AI is very much into gaining performance. So, for example, in a cement plant, it's a huge factory, and we can lose money if the plant is not performing very well. And why the plant could perform not very well? Because there is a breakage here, a breakage there, and small things are breaking all the time. And so, for example, we put AI into predictive maintenance. So the AI engine analyze what are the causes of the maintenance breaks and tell us before it happens that it will happen. And so you can avoid the breakage and then save cost on maintenance, but also produce more. We have also AI in logistics. So, concrete trucks, instead of wasting time on the roads, analyze what are the different customers to deliver in a sequence order, so that you can also optimize the cost and the performance. So we use it a lot in performance. That is fundamental. Logistics, pricing, maintenance, and procurement, and many other things. And as far as I am concerned in strategy, I use it, like we use Gemini and Google at Holcim. And I don't think it's going to replace my team. It's impossible, because I value a lot this emotional and this trust and respect and exchange. But for certain tasks, it helps to go faster.
Excellent.
Data checking and sort of things. So that helps.
Thank you, Virginie. We've had a great panorama. Thank you really for telling us everything, from the strategy to the story to your personal life. Yeah. I think our audience has been amazing also in listening to this story and in sharing with us. We'll now take, I think, a well-deserved break indeed. I promise you, we have one more great guest. We'll reconvene in exactly 15 minutes at 6:15. We'll do one more round, and then I think all of us deserved a really nice drink, which we'll have in the back. So see you in 15 minutes.
Thank you.
I hear the sun is setting outside, so I know that we have to wrap up. So I'll ask if we can all take our seats. And our next guest is already here, so as soon as you're ready, we're ready. And don't worry, we will have drinks at the end of this. So let's hold the socializing. I know it's fun, but let's hold it for just 40 more minutes. Okay. I'm going to look at Nikki already and see, Nikki, if you can give the right example. You're still missing a few people, but we're modeling good behavior. So we're already taking a stand. And for all of the people that are already sitting, we also want to show them that we are ready.
We are always ready.
We're always ready.
We're always ready. But I understood that some of our audience is breaking fast, if that's right. So we should give them time to do that. And we'll get going.
Okay, I think the doors are about to close. So if you're still standing, please take a seat so we can get started. Yes, I know, Virginie, you're a superstar, but hold on for a few more minutes. Okay. Okay, very well. Well, so we're going to do this in a slightly different way because my guest is already on the podium. So I'm going to suggest that to get started formally, that we give a very warm welcome to Nikki Lang of BCG. Take a seat. Excellent. Okay, Nikki, you are, of course, tasked with the premier slot, but also the hardest slot, which is the final slot of the evening, because you and I are essentially the only people who are standing between our wonderful students and their drinks and dinner.
Oh.
So
I have to be better than all the virgin mojitos or Negronis that you're looking forward to. Okay, good.
That's right. That's right. But we're very happy that you're here, Nikki. You have a global role at BCG. You were actually the head of the BCG Henderson Institute.
Yeah.
Stefan earlier on has introduced you with many more accolades.
Okay, good.
Because
so
it turns out...
It's good that I wasn't in the room. So okay.
But it turns out that you actually have 3 or 4 titles at BCG. Do you want to repeat to us which those are? So you lead the Henderson Institute. You're a managing partner or a managing director and a senior partner.
Yes, right. Yeah. So maybe we start with this. So look, at BCG, maybe just a quick introduction. I'm actually Austrian by birth. I always say that the interesting thing is that I always describe my life in 4 numbers: 3, 30, 50, and 300. So.
Wow.
First, I think it's the most important. I'm the father of 3 amazing children. 1 girl of 19, 1 girl of 16, which actually opened the summer ball here in this room.
Oh, wow.
End of last June. We have this tradition that, you know, when you go to dancing school, you have a summer ball where you show to your parents what you've learned during the year. So she went down this staircase end of June last year. So that's my second daughter. And my third child is a boy, which is 12. And we're still not sure if he's a rugby star or opening a big rock star career, but star is the continuous element in his description of future
That's
jobs.
amazing. So that's,
So
the,
that's
first
the first number.
yeah.
That's a 3. Then the 30 is, it's 30 years that I'm with BCG. Yes, that happens from time to time. The average, I heard that the average time at a consulting firm is 2.9 years, so I'm kind of 10x what the average is.
I brought it down.
Which is also interesting. And 50 is actually an interesting dimension we'll talk about later. I worked in 50 of our 105 offices, every continent, 35 countries, which I think is one of the reasons why I'm still at BCG after 30 years.
Because, of course, if they got tired of you in one country, you could move to the next.
Exactly. That's the survival mode. No. But or maybe they told the other country, "Hey, take this guy. He seems to be good." So
It's right. The other side of the coin.
And 300 is, I think, on a very serious note, is the amount of CEOs I see every year to talk about geopolitics. So virtually and live. Like last week, I was in Kenya. In a couple of days, I met 20 East African CEOs to talk about geopolitics. So that's my free number, 3, 30, 50, 300.
The 4 numbers. I'm going to ask you the last one, a serious question, almost immediately, but I do want to ask you one follow-up question about your daughter coming down the stairs here or there.
With a table there where you have your camera. With my wife, and she was coming down this staircase. Yeah.
And so, for many people, it's a very special thing, especially in geopolitics, if they're invited in the Bayerisches Hof, because of the Munich Security Conference.
Yeah.
But for you, this is not primarily the Munich Security Conference room, but the room in which your daughter did
where
her ball.
Johanna came down the staircase. Well, I was at the Munich Security Conference like 3 weeks ago, where we had Marco Rubio here. Actually, when the Munich Security Conference is, it's actually the other way around. The scene is over there, and everyone is sitting here on the staircases. And last year I was here when J.D. Vance was lecturing us about what Europe is all doing wrong, from immigration to defense. This year Marco Rubio was a little bit more sugar-coated, but the core message was actually very similar. So I don't know. I was sitting there probably somewhere. 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
So I suppose it's a nicer memory for you.
It's a mixture between Johanna Summerball and MSc, yes. Yeah. But I'm...
and J.D. Vance berating you and your daughter making you proud.
Yeah.
Now on to the serious question, which is on geopolitics. I mean, you are effectively leading the practice, let's say, or sort of you lead BCG when it comes to geopolitics. I could say, because you've been doing it for a couple of years, well done for seeing it coming, but right now it's so serious that it's worrying. Because now you get calls from people saying we're really in trouble, and maybe even we worry not just for our company performance, but for our employee and maybe our personal well-being.
Yeah. So let me maybe put a little bit of a perspective to this. So look. And you asked me to tell you a little bit of a personal background. So, and you're students, so you probably will have conversations with your parents about what studies you should do, and so on. So I will share you a very personal experience which happened in 1989. I don't ask you where you were in 1989. But I was 18 years old. I was born in 1971, so I was 18 years old in 1989. And I said to my father, who was in a long lineage of Austrian ambassadors, I said to my father, I want to study business administration.
He was very disappointed.
The answer was, that's not a science. Then I said, yeah, Papa, but I still think that's important. I really like business, economics, and so on. He said, no, you should study law like me and my grandfather. I said, no, I won't study law, it's boring. So to make a long story short, I went into business administration. I think I was very happy about this. But I was very much personally kind of educated in what I would call an international relations environment. Like I always said, like while other families were talking about football games at breakfast table, we were talking about Yom Kippur War or the liberation of US hostages in 1979 at the now famous embassy in Iran. So if you're like 6, 7, 8, and you don't talk about football, but you talk about Yom Kippur War and the revolution in 1979, you kind of are a bit prepared, or SALT 1 or SALT 2 in the 1980s and whatever. So like my whole life was a little bit like, I'm actually very much drawn towards business and business impact and companies. And at the same time, I was very interested in which is the context in which companies are evolving. And I think, so that brought me then, and now I'm answering your question. Sorry, this was a long-winded way to get to your answer. That 10 years ago, I went to our executive committee and I said, hey guys, we need to have a geopolitics practice. And so half of this executive committee was looking at me and said, hey, Nikki, what did you smoke? And half of them said, oh, that's actually really interesting. And by the way, you're the best guy to drive that forward. And yeah, so 10 years ago, 2016, we created a practice, we created a center. We have now hundreds of people working there, and I think we're very grateful that we have made this decision.
Because companies, of course, need guidance now. There was a long era in which actually started just as you were deciding to go in business in 1989. You know, there was a long era which stretches most people's careers, in which there seemed to be what was called the end of history, specifically the end of geopolitics. Because in the 1990s and in the 2000s, there was a story of globalization. You could go everywhere. We heard personal stories today of Virginie going to China and going to Russia and going to Algeria and Max going to China. And what was true on the personal level was true on the business level. And so those first 20, 25 years, it was only normal that companies said, we don't have to worry about politics and geopolitics, because it seemed like it didn't matter anymore.
Yeah, you know, it's quite interesting. I don't only have one CEO, I have many CEOs who tell me, you know, probably until 2 years ago, when I was looking at the newspaper, I took the political pages and turned them around until I read the companies and markets or business section. And I think that has massively changed. And I think we had a conversation before. I think, as I told you, I was 20 years old in 1991, and I'm using 1991 and not 1989, because 89 was, of course, the end of the Iron Curtain, but I think 1991 is more important because it was the end of the Soviet Union, which was actually a definition of the duopolar world we had after 45. And I think that the time between 1991 and 2022 are 30 years, which were a historical anomaly.
Right.
And the only problem is that most of us grew up in this historical anomaly. So you believe that this anomaly is normal, yeah? And I kept saying this like 10 years ago. I said, like, we're at the end of a time where, which was imprinted by two interesting books, which I admire both writers, don't misunderstand me. I think Francis Fukuyama is a great academic. And
he's, of course, the one who wrote the book,
he wrote the book
End of
At the
History.
End of History, and Tom Friedman, who is a big New York Times commentator, wrote The World is Flat.
Which was about the globalization.
And which was about the globalization, and we can send everything everywhere, and there are no tariffs and stuff like this. And both, I think, are great authors and great thinkers, and they were absolutely reflecting what was the thinking back then. But the reality is that the world has changed. And the world has changed through COVID, through tariffs, through a multipolar world, through a war in Ukraine, through a war in Iran, and so on and so on. We'll come to that later.
I want to ask you about that because, and maybe I switch it around. Maybe we have the conversation about what's happening now first, and then go back in time to your personal story. Because right now, it's very important that companies have that geopolitical muscle. It is a matter, in some regions, of survival.
Yeah.
But what can companies do? Because what we see is, on the one hand, we have companies who say, well, then I guess I just go to the politician and I do whatever the politician says. And on the other hand, you have companies who say, we're staying out of politics. And it turns out that might be a very bad choice as well. And so it seems like you're doomed if you do, and you're doomed if you don't engage with politics and geopolitics. What can companies do when they understand geopolitics?
Yeah. So let me maybe just relate back to an interesting coffee chat I had at the Davos meeting of 2022. So normally Davos happens in January, as you all know, but this year, despite Klaus Schwab's attempt to battle COVID, they decided to put it into May.
Correct.
So it was a very odd Davos because you were not going there with big boots and snow and kind of sliding, but it was this lovely kind of spring moment on the promenade in Davos. And I was sitting there with the CEO of a large multinational company, $100 billion revenue, 200,000 people, and he gave me a very interesting sentence. And by the way, present in 112 countries. And he said, you know, Nikolaus, it's very interesting because for me as a CEO, I've been CEO now for 10 years. And so, this whole digital stuff appeared on my agenda somewhere in 2014-15. And the whole climate and sustainability stuff appeared on my agenda in 2017-18. And so in 2022, Davos was in May. So that was 3 months after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And then he said to me, and you know, Nikolaus, geopolitics appeared on my agenda on the 24th of February of this year. And I found it very interesting because I just realized that probably 95% of the companies never had geopolitics on their agenda. It's like the CEO who's kind of taking the political pages, turning them around to get to the company and market section. And so, to answer your first question, I think many companies do not have a geopolitical muscle.
Right, still not.
So what we have then done over the last couple of years is we have done a large-scale analysis with the World Economic Forum, with IMD Lausanne, sorry, competitive, but still, and we did a large-scale analysis of 60 companies where we said, what do you have actually as a geopolitical muscle? So, what do you have as a mandate? What do you have in terms of radar and sonar? So, kind of understanding geopolitical moves. What do you have in terms of, do you have actually a department that is handling geopolitics or not? And it's quite interesting because most of the companies do not yet have this muscle, although they all tell that you need to have it. Yeah, and I think the reality is that we have tons of clients who are facing tariff problems, who are facing export restriction, who are facing logistical problems, like even before the war in Ukraine, the war in Iran, you had Bab el-Mandeb, better known as Red Sea, which was a problem. You have cyber attacks. So the reality of companies is that they need actually to develop this geopolitical ability to understand what's going on and to react in terms of supply chain resilience and so on.
Now, imagine that I was a company and I started working with you when you started the practice of geopolitics. And I had operations in the Middle East. I had logistics going through all of the sort of choke points of the global economy. I had operations in Eastern Europe, in both Russia and Ukraine. And I had a global presence, including in Europe, China, and the United States. What would have been different if I had worked with you on geopolitics from 5 or 10 years ago already?
Yeah. Well, I think the key point is you would have had probably an operating footprint which would have been concentrated on 1 or 2 mega factories around the world. And that's what
initially.
we saw. Initially.
Right.
You would have, that's what I said, like if you were a smart person in 2000, you would have been stupid not to set up a 1 million unit factory in China or in Bangladesh.
Right.
Because there were no tariffs, logistics didn't have any kind of carbon pricing on it, you had no restrictions, and the world was growing. And I think that's a big difference. I think today you're moving from this 1 million factory in I'm just saying 1 million as an illustrative volume, but I'm saying you're moving from a 1 million factory in Bangladesh or China to 100,000 factories, so smaller factories,
in
network
Mexico,
of factories in Turkey, in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Mexico, in Ukraine, in Korea, to serve Japan, China, Europe, and so on.
Right.
And I think that's the fundamental change that would have happened. And we are actually helping clients to redesign the operating footprint in that logic. We're helping clients to think through, okay, I used to have one single supplier from China. Now we realize that the Suez Canal can be blocked, not even by the Houthis, but also by just a Chinese cargo ship that is just turning around in this bitter lake. We realize that if there is COVID, you might have certain port activities that are not working because authorities tell you that you cannot kind of unload or load in specific ports. You also realize that the cost of shipping, if you add carbon pricing and so on, gets very expensive. You realize the tariffs got more expensive. So we do not yet have tariffs here in Europe, but Morocco has a free trade agreement. Bangladesh doesn't have a free trade agreement.
Right. Now, this is, I think, when it comes to the operations, and especially if you're a company that produces goods, then the whole physical reorganization of your company globally would have been one of the things that you would have done in the last couple of years, and you will certainly see more companies continue to do it in the coming years. Then, of course, there are the black swan events, or at least the kind of things that there's very little you can do about it. If you say, I have, sort of a few regional headquarters, and one of them happens to be in the UAE, it would have been impossible, or would it have been, to say, I'm going to relocate everybody there to somewhere safe in the eventuality that there is an American attack on Iran. With those kinds of things that happen, what can and should companies do with these kinds of events that, frankly, you just hope never happen, and that, it's really hard to strategically count with happening?
Yeah. So it's funny, when I started at BCG 30 years ago, I had some clients who did long range planning, and by long range planning I mean like really 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
And what was impressive is that there were tons of people working on this long range plan, and they were focusing on one revenue number and on one profit number. I don't really, seriously, and it was not a number like we want to have 11 billion or 50 billion, but it was like we want to have 11,532,000 euro, comma 32 cents.
I'm getting a feeling you're talking about a German car company, yeah?
No comment. So that was the way how this planning was done in the 1990s. And the same was done actually also for the bottom line, which was the profit. I think what we really see now, and this is 30 years ago, what we really see now today is that companies are going into a scenario planning. And as you said, also a scenario planning, which is kind of turbocharged by black swan events. Right. So I have clients that say, okay, let's go into 3-4 different scenarios. How is our top line looking if we have no major conflicts? Like, I was just actually quite lucky. I was like, last week, Tuesday, I was in Abu Dhabi in a leadership offsite for one of the largest shipping companies in the world. And they are very clearly running scenarios. They are saying, okay, what is our revenue in case of no regional conflicts? We have 10 major maritime choke points on top of Straits of Taiwan, Malacca, Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, Panama Canal. They are looking at a few others. And they say, okay, what is the impact of a closure of each of those on our revenue and so on? And so to make a long story short, I think that more and more companies are moving from this like 30-year-old 11,352,032 cents, whatever revenue planning, to something which is much more flexible.
Now, I guess one more thing that you could wonder is, we heard earlier on the case of Holcim, which makes a huge strategic decision to say, because of a number of factors, at the end, we decide to split this company into two and to separate out one market that has clearly a very different dynamic, both in terms of economy, but also probably political choices, which in their case is the United States, and then pretty much everything else. Is that also something that we should expect to see more often going forward?
Well, I always say, people ask me, what are the 5 no-regret moves you should do in a geopolitical environment, and this is your number 4 move. So number 1 is build a geopolitical muscle. Number 2, we discussed it already, is supply chain resilience. So move from the 1 million factory to the 10 times 100,000 factories. Number 3 is prepare for price volatility and inflation. We will not, even if Mr. Trump loves and hopes to have a 1% inflation, we will not have that for the next decade. Number 4 is create differentiated organizations for a fragmented world. And number 5 is ensure access to tech and AI. So coming back to your number 4, I personally think that in a fragmented world, it would be really dangerous to have a headquarter-led organization. You have to have a much more flexible, modular organization. You mentioned, now I didn't know that, but you mentioned about Holcim and the US logic. I have a lot of clients who decide to actually differentiate their China business and say we make China independent of the global world. Or we go for 3 different organizations, one that is more Europe-led, one that is more US organized, one that is China organized. So I think that's what you see. Yes, this kind of having differentiated organizations for a fragmented world is a clear trend. Yeah.
I want to ask you one final question, and then I want to about this geopolitical aspect, and then I want to turn to the more personal questions and sort of your course of life. And it's maybe the most sensitive one because, you know, obviously BCG itself has also experienced that being active in geopolitics has risks and can have adverse effects. When it's unavoidable or when it's very close to a company's business that they're going to interact with political players, when should they decide to lean in and when should they sort of say, we're going to try to stay out of it?
Yeah, well, I think it's very interesting, like, and I'm now talking more about my clients because they always ask about when should we speak up, when shouldn't we speak up. I personally think that in a geopolitically fragmented and moving world, as a corporate, you need to be much more proactive in shaping the context than you did that maybe 10 or 20 years ago.
As a general rule, you have to...
Where the context was much more stable.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of companies like when we did this geopolitical muscle report with the World Economic Forum, one of the things that came, I had like about 30 CEOs in the room in Davos and we were talking about, and one of the things that emanated was actually one of the biggest things they struggled with is how I should actually engage in shaping the context. And I think in the Western world, the word lobbying is still very dirty. And I'm not sure if lobbying is the right word, but it is at least, although it has a very interesting historical source. I don't know.
Etymology, sort of the idea that I suppose it comes from the UK Parliament, that there was
the UK Parliament, House of Lords, the lobby in the Westminster Abbey, and you had this...
And so you couldn't enter as a business person, I suppose, in the actual Parliament, but you could meet people in the lobby next to it.
So we are referring to the same story. But so I think there's a point of I think the moment you have a very clear set trade logic, business logic, and so on, okay, you follow by the rules. But if this context is moving, I think businesses realize that they need to play a more active role.
Right. Now, I want to go back to the origin story that you told us earlier on of when you were not yet Dr. Nikolaus Lang, you know, with all the accolades that you now have, but when you were still, I suppose, you know, a smaller Nicky or littler Nicky, you already told us that you grew up in an environment where geopolitics, but diplomacy was fully present. And you already told us sort of this big moment where you told your parents, I'm going to study business.
Yeah.
But to add insult to injury, I suppose you also decided after that to go and do a PhD in China.
Yeah.
I mean, not adding insult to injury, but basically really going with this choice of saying, I'm going to go in the direction of business, because your PhD was, I suppose, in the field of business.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do it at a frontier economy at the time,
that's right.
which was China. Tell us more about that decision and how it went.
Yeah, so I always did a series of odd decisions in my life, and I always went against the mainstream. So maybe not by deciding to do business administration, but China and also then the decision for my employer was against the mainstream. So I think going to China in 1993 or deciding to do a PhD in 1993 was actually very odd.
Unheard of.
Because
almost.
in St. Gallen at this time, the cool guys did their licenciat, so their master, and then they went to the Chicago School of Economics where Milton Friedman was teaching. That was the cool way. You went to the US, that was cool, that was what we were doing. And going to China was like, what is this crazy guy doing?
Because this is, of course, still 8 years before China's access to the WTO.
Yeah, of course. Well,
I was China still led by Deng Xiaoping.
We were talking. This was like 3 years after Tiananmen Square. This was the time where you were traveling in. I was still traveling in wagons with wooden benches, segregated foreigners and Chinese. I'm always saying to my Chinese consultants, I said, like, my first case study company was in Wuxi, which is I don't know how many kilometers west from Shanghai, but I just remember the train ride took 3.5 hours, while today it's 40 minutes on the highway. So that was a world in itself, yeah. And you landed in Beijing, and at the airport you still had this kind of revolving wooden doors at the airport. So so I said, no, I don't go to this Chicago School of Business. I want to do something different. I want to go to look at something. And so, yeah, so I did my 1-year PhD research between Harbin in the north, which actually has more Russian Orthodox churches than Chinese temples, because there are a lot of Russians who came from Siberia, down to Wuxi and Shanghai. And I think it was one of the best years in my life. But it was very different.
And what you did was you studied companies, you did company visits at the time? Or what?
Yeah, well, my topic was, so the PhD back then was actually between St. Gallen and the Sophia University and Fudan University. So those three.
If I'm ever able to say both St. Gallen in the way you do and Wuxi in the way you do, I feel like I will have made it in life.
Yeah, global citizen then. Huh? Okay, good. Yeah, no, but so it was interesting because back then, so my topic was joint venture management in China. And I had a very ambitious professor, so I approached him with a dissertation project, which was like, hey, Professor Brauchling, I'd like to write about joint venture management in China. And I had found the Schindlers and Volkswagen of this world, and we're talking 93, yeah? So most of this joint venture had a single-digit lifespan. And he was kind of the typical professor, like, hey, Mr. Lang, you know this is not ambitious enough. I think you should do a comparative analysis between Sino-European and Sino-Japanese joint ventures. That would be interesting. And I said, holy shit, how do I get the Japanese on board? And at the end of the day, yeah, I did like 6 case studies, and I had Japanese and Chinese companies. The PhD is public. You can go in your university library and look at it. And so literally I spent like a year doing about 200 interviews in China. I stayed in 6 companies between 2 and 3 weeks each, and I did my research there.
Mm. I suppose it sort of speaks to what we heard from the other speakers in a different way. And what they said is that in the first years of your career, it's actually worthwhile not yet to, I suppose, in the first years of your career, you're really investing in yourself, in your skills, in your knowledge, and that forms the foundation for what you will do later. Obviously, you did not end up living in China and leading joint ventures, but the foundation that you put there was to truly understand how this emerging global economy was working and how you had that sort of meeting between East and West. Now, yeah?
Peter, if I may add one thing which is super important, I think, for all the people here in that room, is, and again, I won't say this is the kind of magical recipe, just but looking back over 30 or 35 years of education plus professional life is, I think, don't let yourself be influenced by your parents, your friends, or something like this. Make your own choice, because you have to live with that for the next decades. That's number one. Number two, I think, I always would go, if I have the chance to go for something that is well known or something that is pioneer, I would always go for something that is pioneer, even if you don't use it afterwards. And the number 3 is there are indirect ways on how to, what you learn there will help you in your career.
And of course, yeah, in ways that you don't know. It's like that classic line from the founder of Apple, who says the dots, the connection between the dots you see, they make sense looking back at it, but not
exposed.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting. Like, I just give you one interesting anecdote. When I started at BCG, I was like a young associate. I was actually staffed on a case which I didn't really like for a German provincial bank. And then suddenly one of our top leaders worldwide called me on a Saturday. And he said, "Hey, Nikki, I have a case for you." I said, "Hey, that's great, but I'm actually staffed on the other case." No, I talked to the partner on this case. You're freed up from this case. I said, "Oh, wow." Cool. And then he said, "Even better, I'm sending you to Japan." And I said, "Oh, Japan?" And then I said, "Why? Yeah, you know, we're doing a due diligence in Japan, and there's this Japanese team, but I need someone who translates the results of the Japanese team for my German client. And I heard that you were in Japan, and that you studied in Japan, and that you speak Japan." I said, "Well, my Japanese is like kindergarten Japanese." And he said, "Well, that's for due diligence, it's enough, that's fine." And then I said, "Well, I'm doubtful whether that's enough." But
now I've got many questions.
The funny thing is that for me it was interesting because I had done the studies in Japan, and like 1 year later or 2 years later, I was actually playing a really pivotal role, as a very junior person, between a Japanese team and a German client.
Right.
Just because of the cultural understanding of Japan and bringing that across. And also in my, I would say, like, I don't know, I've worked in my 30 years of BCG, I've been probably 50 times in China because of my studies, because of my understanding how joint ventures worked. And I've set up joint ventures for car companies, but also for tech companies, for logistics companies, and so on. So I think the interesting thing is the more exotic your profile is, probably my guess is the better it'll be.
And there's got to be people who can express this in even better ways than we can. But you know, it's got to be, because if you're like a partner and you're looking at a group of associate consultants that you can choose from, then what really matters is that they can connect you with something.
Yeah.
That way you stand out.
Clear.
Because at that time, in that partner's mind, when they had hundreds of associates to choose from, you know, somebody said, "Nikki is the Japan, China, German guy."
I was the only one back then.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that really helps, and therefore it's a good idea to actually do the thing that people keep telling you, which is to follow your passion. And it may sound so, you know, do you really have to say that when, in fact, if your passion happens to be Chinese, Japanese, European joint ventures, turns out that's a very good idea.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying this is the recipe, but in my case, it was really beneficial. And it managed, and this is also something which I would say to everyone, and I know it might sound very plain, but I think if I look, as you said, if I look at a team, if I look at people that are interested in joining a firm or a team, whatever, I'm always looking at what is actually special about that person. What is not mainstream?
Now, clearly you had that very early on. You did make that choice that our two other guests also made earlier in your career, which is to say that for the first few years after your studies, you said, "I'm going to do something mainstream, which is to join a consulting firm, and I'm going to do that because it's going to give me a wide variety of experiences, and I'm going to learn a lot of skills." Now, the two other people we had as guests, and myself, I have to add, who spent 2 years at Bain & Company, God bless them for hiring me and sticking with me for 2 years. We all made the decision after those first few years to then say, and now we're going to do something that we really like. You know, we're going to go to an actual company, and we found what we really think we can do good or well. And in your case, that what you really like turned out to be what you were already doing. Tell us more about that decision to stay with BCG and to stay with BCG and to stay with BCG for 30 years.
Yeah, but may I ask you, may I start with another observation which is very interesting. When I was 94, 95, in making my choice of who I would go, I had actually offers not from Bain, but from McKinsey, from Berger, and from BCG. And I think back then the more obvious choice would have been to go for McKinsey and Berger.
Sure.
And I respect our competitors, all good. And actually, it was actually very odd to take BCG. It was by far the smallest company, but BCG back then was 1/8 of McKinsey and half of Berger in Germany. Yeah. So now it's also interesting, like when I joined BCG in 1995, we were about 500 million revenues. We were 500 million revenues, 1,500 employees. We're now 13 billion and 40,000 employees. So
I do recall that you said that inflation is here to stay, I suppose.
Yeah.
It
well,
also
that
played
plays
a role. Not from 500 million to 13 billion,
no,
but it must have played a little bit of a role.
But I think we went through a low inflation period over the last 25 years.
That's true.
Except the last 2 years. But I think so. Back then, I just want to underline is it was a non-obvious choice to go for BCG, and I chose BCG because of the people I met there, the culture, and so on and so on. So that's just to answer that. Now to come back to your question and saying why did I stay for 30 years, I think, look, as I said, and we had this in the pre-conversation, the initial choice between for BCG was actually a middle way choice. Between one side I had, sorry if I say this, it sounds a bit stupid, but I had written the best PhD in St. Gallen. I had like a summa cum laude, whatever, and there were like 3 professors who said, oh, you want to become associate professor, you have to go in academia and stuff like this. And then I had super interesting jobs from Schindler, Nestle, and a few others who said, hey, you did this PhD in China, why don't you join us, Nestle China, Schindler China, and stuff like this. And I think one way was for me too theoretical, the academia work. The other one was a bit too practical, and that's why I said, let's try for a couple of years this middle way. That was actually the original choice why I ended up in consulting. Now 30 plus years after, I think I was very fortunate in BCG, and I'm really saying fortunate because this was given to me, is that every 3 to 4 years I was actually offered with another topic role in BCG country, which gave me a new passion, a new drive. I told you that. I think 2000, like after a few years, I was close to quitting, and then BCG sent me to Kuala Lumpur for a couple of years, best time I had for many years. And then I was privileged to lead one of our largest client relationships for 10 years. I was privileged to run one of the largest practice areas for 8 years. And all these kind of new roles makes it always interesting.
Yeah, and I guess that's also something to realize when people chart their path. You know, you do have every few years that choice that you need to make.
Yes.
Am I going to stay where I am, or am I going to go somewhere else? And sometimes the choice is actually neither of the two of them, because sometimes you can change by staying where you are.
Exactly.
And that's what your story is, really.
And I think the question is also, what do you lose when you move? This is also something important. Like maybe, and it's different, but not even. I think you should never underestimate the kind of implicit credit value network you have in an organization in which you are.
Right, which is sort of the reverse, the positive reverse of the medal of like the politics of an organization, is sort of the network that you build up, the connection that you have, your social capital that you've built up in an organization.
Yeah, but I want to put it positively. Like I think, can you pick up the phone and call into 105 offices and you know that you get whatever, the slides, the information you want within 3 hours? Or can't you do that?
Right.
And I think this has nothing to do with politics. This has just to do with, and this happens because you're in an organization where probably I have helped that person in the past.
No, absolutely. But I'm saying in some cases, when you're part of a large organization,
Yeah.
The negative experience can be that because it doesn't work that way, maybe people you don't like sort of block you.
Oh, yeah.
And the positive element is when actually everything is possible. Maybe one last question before we close. I'm not sure if I'm young enough to know if our audience still likes this concept of ikigai, which I suppose would have been is that a Japanese concept? Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
And I don't know if that's still something young people like, but people of my generation, the millennials, they like that idea. This idea that you combine at some point what the world needs, what you're good at, and what you're being paid for. Do you feel like you've reached that sort of perfect state when you said, I'm going to start up this geopolitics center at BCG and I sort of merge, what I like and what the world needs and how we can build a business going forward?
I think it would be a bit exaggerated to say that you get the perfect equilibrium, but I think I feel every day very fortunate that I can work on topics which are very close to my heart, which I think are really differentiating, which mean a lot for the world, and which are critical for our clients, for sure. Yes, and I think it's and I think this. You also have to be clear. Like, we haven't chosen the world in which we are acting. Yeah, so this is around us, but being knowledgeable and able to help clients, friends, to navigate that world, I think is extremely rewarding. Yes.
And so it shows, I guess, that with everything that happens in the world also, and this is to bring it back to your family heritage, for your father and grandparents and the generations before that, at that time, perhaps the world that they grew up in, which was sort of a world of, at some point in Austria, which was a grander Austria, and a world of empires, and a world in which actually diplomatic contacts were very important and actually very useful. That was a world that really made sense for them to do what they did. And in some way, even if you didn't know yet what world was being born, maybe that's what you sensed when you told your father, I'm going to do business, and ultimately you found sort of what it means to be a diplomat in this modern world, which is to say you'll help companies sort of find their way in this new global economy and with the new actors that make decisions.
Yeah, right. And I think it's really, it's from me, I think, as I said, it's, I've been convinced over the last probably 20 years that the world will change. The last 10 years have accelerated all that. And I find it particularly interesting to be in that room because where your camera stands, I think there was one of the most interesting quotes I've heard in the last 10 years. There was on the 19th of February 2022, so that was 5 days before the full-scale invasion of the Ukraine. Then Polish Prime Minister Morawiecki was standing there, and he was closing his speech. He was describing the threat. We all were looking at the 150,000 Russian soldiers on the Ukrainian border, and people were traveling to Moscow. Macron was traveling to Moscow. Everyone was traveling to Moscow, trying to convince Putin not to attack. And what I found particularly interesting is that he was standing there and he was saying, "Hey, ladies and gentlemen, after 35 years of geopolitical napping, it's time to wake up." And I think this wake-up call has reached most of us, whether we like it or not. It's like the hotel wake-up call. You generally don't look forward to it, but you need to take it and you need to react to it.
And if you do it the right way, then actually you can make sure that you do something within this new world that you really like, and it's also very useful, which is what you are doing. Nikki Lang, thank you so much for sharing this time with us and all your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and now I think it's time, and we've all deserved now to have a drink, so we will invite you. Just know that the people in the back, we will ask you probably to stand up first, because your chairs will need to be removed so we can all go to the back and have a drink. Our speakers are still here for a while. If you want to have a quick chat with Nicky, he'll be here for another 20 minutes, so make sure you hurry up. Thank you all, and good luck.